It's really interesting. I think this is the beauty of being in this space. You get to meet a lot of people and you get to understand different worlds. For me, a lot of things, it's like, well, I didn't want to bring in Bitcoin now, but I would say being in the
Do it.
Bitcoin space has been an eye opener. Yeah, because I get to understand why people are the way they are. You might be blaming somebody for how they are, how they respond to things, how they react to things. But then if you truly understand how things work for them, and then considering they don't have the same information as you, then you're like, it's not really their fault. Like they have a different experience from us as well. So it's really good. And then also there's the bit of, getting to learn about other things and wanting to do better for your community so that at least at some point in the future you can be on the same level or I don't know.
What has been the weirdest things that you found out then about other people or their cultures or how they think? Like what's been the strangest, the biggest culture shock?
The biggest culture I think is most Westerners don't see Africa as like a continent. They see it as one huge country, or even if they see it like as a continent, they assume all the challenges that we have cut across, which might be true. There are some challenges that are similar to every African country, but there are some things that are special and relevant to other countries as compared to others. So they kind of bundle us up together and say, Africans, they have this challenge. They don't have water. They don't have this and this and this and all that. So for me, it was like, oh, wow. I used to see it on the internet a lot, but then I was like, this is just one of few people. But then you get to interact with them. They're like, oh, so this is actually true. This is the reality of Westerners, But I used to get mad at them, but then I realized it's just misinformation. They're not exposed to these things. They're not exposed to these things as they should be. So I'm not sure who I should be blaming. Is it the school system? Is it the government?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think some of it's probably by design, and then some of it is probably geographical because I found a very similar thing coming from the UK to the US is that
Mhm.
America is very America centric, whereas when you're in Europe, you're next to lots of smaller countries that have very different cultures. And so you're very used to dealing across like different nationalities. But many Americans have never left the country. Like they've literally never stepped outside of their own country, don't have a passport. And so everything's kind of very America focused. I mean, it was interesting recently, the ETFs, the exchange traded funds, were launched in the US. And it's been this long, protracted process, very political, lots of arguing in various different forums. And it was a huge, big deal. And everybody on Bitcoin Twitter was waiting for this event. It was like this massive, build up. Oh my God, the price is going to moon. It just got ridiculous when I'm sat up here in Canada and I'm just like, Canada's had an ETF since February 2021. And I can promise you that 80% of Americans in the Bitcoin space are unaware of that fact.
Yeah.
It's literally like north of their border. So, I mean, you see that a lot. Yeah. And I think also there's like the linguistic thing. I think one of the reasons, though, that people tend to group many African countries together is because you guys do seem to have a common language. It's as though everybody in Africa sort of speaks some level of English or French, maybe, but there seems to be a lot of commonality across countries. And I feel like when Africans meet other Africans, they're able to communicate much more effectively than, say, if you're a British person going to Germany. I mean, Germans speak pretty good English, but it's much harder. So it does sometimes feel like when you meet people from Africa, they all speak English. And so they almost seem like this homogenous group to an outsider.
Well, I think, like you said, it's by design because one, English is the language of trade. That's one. So if you're not
Right.
able to speak English, then you're definitely cut off. And then, of course, it goes back to who colonized you. So, like for example, Kenya, it was like the East African side, it's British. So we definitely, all of us have to speak in English. So it's also that as well. When it comes to like the native languages, we have so many different tribal languages that if we were to go back and speak our own native languages, then I don't think we would be able to understand each other, right?
Right.
But we also, other than English, we do have Swahili that's spoken by most African countries. So that also helps, just bringing us back to our
Oh,
traditional.
what? So Swahili spoken more broadly across Africa?
Yeah, yeah. Well, some countries,
Oh,
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know that. Why is that?
Because again, Swahili was also a language of trade by the Arabs. It came about with the
Mm.
Arabs, you know. So Swahili came about when they wanted to communicate with, of course, Africans, and we had our our native languages. So that's how Swahili was introduced, you know. So for in order for you to actually participate in the trades, you had to speak Swahili. So Swahili is
Mm.
a basically it's a Bantu language that has been derived from different tribal languages. So there's a bit of each and every language inside of Swahili.
And so if you went to a shop in Kenya, would you more likely speak Swahili to the shopkeeper, or would you speak English?
Swahili, unless they're foreigners.
Ah, okay. Oh,
Mm.
interesting. That's
Yeah, but
interesting.
then again, there's different types of Swahili. The Swahili that is spoken in Kenya is not the same as the Swahili that's spoken in Tanzania. So the Tanzanian one is more of like, let me give an example with the West. So it's like British English and American English. So the American English is so sort of like swaggish, you know, don't really consider grammar and all that. So in Tanzania, they consider all that, but Kenya is whatever you can mix about as long as they get to understand you.
Oh, I see. So you would understand if you spoke to somebody in Tanzania in English, you
Yeah,
would be able
yeah,
to communicate, right?
yeah,
So it's just
yeah, yeah.
slightly different. Oh, that's really fascinating. I didn't realize that Swahili was spoken more broadly. That explains a lot why it's really like the only African language I feel like most non-Africans know of. Like if you say
Yeah,
name me an African language, somebody will say Swahili for sure.
yeah, yeah.
And so you're from Kenya and based in Kenya.
Yeah.
And have you traveled much across the other continent? Because I'm curious about this from a Bitcoin context, how much you've seen and what your thoughts are.
No, no, I haven't traveled outside Africa, but I've traveled, of course, within Africa.
You have. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. So I listened to one of your podcasts this morning just to prepare for this call because I was really curious about what you'd done. But what really piqued my interest is obviously you guys had an event, I think, recently, and there were quite a lot of people that traveled over from the Bitcoin community. But there was this video of you. I posted it on Twitter, and you were like, they called you up onto the stage, and you were doing this dance. She's got her own
Ah.
keys. I just thought that was so cool. It was such a like celebratory environment, and I was like, "Gosh, we're really, especially being British." I was like, "We're so repressed."
I mean, we are Africans, we love to dance. I mean, it's part of us. It's part of us.
Yeah, so I was really curious to learn about what you're doing because I have a similar organization based out of North America, so Access Tribe, and my mission is to bring more women into Bitcoin. So we're
Mhm.
doing very similar things, but I suspect that we have some very different challenges. So I was really excited actually to chat to you, find out what you're doing, how you're doing it, what your challenges are, how you're overcoming them,
Mhm.
and I guess just cross share really information. So I would love to know a bit more about your background and how you got to Bitcoin. Like, what's your Bitcoin journey and like what were you doing before you discovered it?
Okay, so okay, so let me just start from when I like graduated. So I did banking and finance in campus, and then of course I got employed. I left employment because I felt like that wasn't it for me. I felt I wasn't going anywhere with employment, plus the 8 to 5 thing was like really not making sense for me. So I decided to go into entrepreneurship. So I started running my own small businesses. I think 2 years later, I took myself back to school because my family wasn't having none of it. Imagine having a daughter who is a banker and then she leaves and then she's running her small businesses. It wasn't really making sense to them. So I took myself back to school. I did events organization. And then I, of course, found my company that's called Lo-Ryce Events. So Lo-Ryce Events is a company that consults for both corporate events and social events. So when I discovered Bitcoin, or rather the blockchain technology, I was doing events. So in 2018, 2017, around between 2015 to 2018, there was a lot of hype around blockchain technology, the same way we have AI, you know. People would just attach anything, blockchain to any name, you know. because one, there was a lot of misinformation. We didn't have the correct information. So there was a lot of excitement, there was a lot of hype, and a lot of companies were coming to Africa because it was a green area, it was a fresh market for them. So a friend of mine hooked me up with a certain company, blockchain company. They were coming to launch their product, and they were like, "Hey, can you organize event for them?" And I got to organize the event. So it was at this event that I heard about decentralized finance. So as a young Kenyan lady who was really trying to just get her finances right, because what I had noticed from my experience of the few experience, the little experience that I had with running my businesses, I had challenges when it came to savings, challenges when it came to setting fees for my clients, because every time I would try to do something, either our fiat would be devalued, so at the end of every year, I would work so hard, but had nothing to show for it. So it was really frustrating for me. And at some point, I felt like I had made the wrong decision, like quitting employment, because it wasn't really working. I would work so hard, I would get these gigs, but then at the end of the year, looking at my savings, looking at how well my business is going, nothing was making sense. So when I heard about decentralized finance, I thought to myself, maybe this is it. Maybe this can help me navigate my challenges. So because I did not have like somebody to guide me back then, I, of course, because I wanted to make an extra buck, I, of course, ended up investing in different tokens. I ended up investing in different projects that really didn't make sense. So I lost money here and there. I also made money here and there, which was more of like gambling. It was like I'm gambling. Today I make money, tomorrow I lose money. So it was a bit of tiresome and overwhelming. When the world closed in 2019 during the pandemic, I decided to take a step back and decide, okay, so let me just learn first and then decide from that, because I felt there was some truth in it. I really didn't know what the truth was, but I felt there was some truth in it. So I was like, okay, maybe I should just first decide, I should first learn and then decide if I'm able to invest or just contribute in the space. So 2019, I did, because I could not do any business. I wasn't able to do events. I was doing Forex. So Forex was what was paying my bills then. So on top of that, I chose Bitcoin because it was the mother cryptocurrency. And fast forward to 2020 Kenya, why don't you organize a small event for them? So again, organize the event. It was just for Bitcoiners. That was the first time I was actually in a space where there were only Bitcoiners. Initially, I would attend events that were for crypto guys, it was all about crypto and blockchain technology. But this was the first time I'd actually attended a Bitcoin only event in Kenya, right? So during this meetup, of course, I got to learn, interact with the individuals at that particular meetup. But then I realized there was a huge gap. Well, before I had realized the huge gap in the crypto space, but it wasn't as huge and noticeable as in the Bitcoin space, So I'd attend these crypto events before, and I would say like there's like 30% of attendance from the female side. But now with the first Bitcoin event that I attended, we were only like two females in a group of 30, right? So it really got to me, and I was like, okay, so what's really happening? Because it really didn't make sense, considering Africans constitutes more of like the female population, like we are the majority.
Oh,
We run
really?
yeah,
By
like
how
half or
much?
better. I think it's almost half or slightly above. So it really didn't make sense for me that with the population and the fact that African females run the homes, the majority of the small businesses are run by females. So we are making the transactions, we are sending and receiving money here and there. It really didn't make sense to me that we are being left out with this new technology, right? So I
Mm.
was like, okay, so something needs to be done. I reached out to a few of my friends, and I asked them like, do you know what Bitcoin is? Why is it that you don't participate? Why is it that you don't want to learn about this? So there are a couple of reasons that they gave me, and I was like, okay, so I am female. These are the reasons, and actually legit reasons. These are the reasons that females feel like they cannot or are not able to participate in the space. So what needs to be done? So based on that, on the findings, I decided to create a safe haven, rather community where females, African females, can just come and learn about Bitcoin. They can come and share about their experiences, whether it's personal, whether it's work life, whether it's Bitcoin related. A space where they can feel heard, you know, and at the same time empower themselves. So that's why I came up with Bitcoin DADA. So essentially, DADA means sister in Swahili. So it's more of a sisterhood, right? It's
I
more
wanted
of
to
a
ask you actually what DADA meant. Yeah.
yeah. So DADA is Swahili for sisters. So it's more of a sisterhood than even an educational platform. That was in 2022. It's been like
Gosh,
1
do you
year and
know
a
what
half.
though? I love that framing, a sisterhood. That's
Yeah.
such a nice way of thinking about it. Would you call somebody a dada? Like if you consider somebody a sister, would you say, hey dada? Like
Yeah.
is that okay, so
Yeah.
you would refer to
Yeah.
somebody as that?
Yeah. It's basically mean sister. So I can definitely
Wow.
call you like, you're my dada.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so nice. You're my dada too.
Yeah. And then I was also looking at a name that will make them feel more welcome, you know,
Mm,
and something that they relate to. And like I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, Swahili is normally is used across African countries. So I wanted something that other African women can also relate with, you know, whether they're Nigerians, South Africa, whatever. If they hear Dada, they're like, oh, that sounds female-ish, you know. Let me find out what they're doing. So that's how I came about with Bitcoin Dada. So we have been in operation for 1 year and a half. Started in May 2022. Um, the the course is cohort based. We've had 5 cohorts. The last graduation was last year, the 5th graduation. We are going on to our 6th graduation. We have been able to train more than 300 females with over 100 graduating, because you need to actually participate to consider yourself a full DADA, you know, so not just coming in and learning and then leaving. So we do that. We do that based on, we have online courses which runs twice a week. We have workshops. We also have events. We love events because it brings us more closer.
mm,
Uh, we have been able to reach out to universities, because I felt now with females, being that we have already 5 cohorts, there's already talent and skills that the ladies have. So what we have been able to do is reach out to universities and collaborate with them, and even just share the information that we have with the youth, because we feel, you know, the youth are the next generation. So we have been able to train about 3 campuses so far, and we're looking to even expand to more campuses in Kenya. Recently, it's just over the weekend, we were in Uganda. So we actually had our first event in Uganda, because this year we are looking into expanding physically, not just online, physically in other African countries. So for this year, our goal is to reach out to 8 other countries physically, and just ensure that there are leaders there who can run Bitcoin DADA with or without Marcel. So for me, that's my greatest dream for this year, you know, have a Bitcoin DADA in South Africa with its own leaders and its own course. Because like I said, African countries have different challenges. And if we have like an open source course, right, which the leaders can actually try and customize to their own challenges, you know, that would actually make more sense to them, as opposed to just bundling up the entire information and assuming like, you know, they'll understand this, they'll use it, whatever. So that is what we are planning to do, or we are trying to do this year. What else would I add? Yeah, so in a nutshell, that is what Bitcoin DADA is. So essentially, we are trying to empower the African female through financial education, and we focus on, we're actually using Bitcoin as a tool to do that.
Wow, that's amazing. How big is your organization now? Because you got some funding from the Human Rights Foundation, right? Like how has that helped you deploy?
Mhm. So yes, we did get funding from HRF. We also got funding from Samara Assets. And it has really helped us majorly in expanding our outreach. So we have been able to, like the university that I was talking, the collaborations that I was talking to about, we've been able to, do more events across the country, because you normally also go through like the remote areas as well. They actually need this kind of information as well. The events even here, the workshops are also, this all cost money. And the donations have really been able to help us with that. We have been able, when I started Bitcoin DADA, I was actually doing most of the things by myself.
Mm.
Right now I have like 4 other females who are employed, and I get to pay them in Bitcoin, of course, courtesy of the donations that we have been receiving. So thank you so much to HRF and Samara Assets. Without the fundings, I don't think I would be able to do that.
That's amazing. Wow, that's really incredible. What's your ultimate goal? Like, what's your North Star? Where do you want to get to?
Okay, for me, so when I talk about empowering the African woman, for me, it's not just on individual basis, it's more of the society, you know. Um, I'm looking at breaking down the societal barriers that inhibit females to actually participate in digital economies, right? And I feel once we are able to do that, essentially what we are doing is creating a ripple effect in these communities. And I know you understand that once you educate a female, you're essentially educating the entire community. So for me, I am looking at if Africa or even the world considers Bitcoin as a liberating tool, then we cannot say we want to gain freedom without including half of the population,
Mm.
right? So for me, my major goal is actually to get us as Bitcoiners or as liberators or as freedom fighters to that point by bringing the ones who are actually left behind, which essentially is the females, right? So when you're able to actually tag along the females, then everybody else will be onboarded.
Mm, that makes a lot of sense. I'm really curious about your thoughts about the lack of female participation in Bitcoin, because my own experience, I had 20 years in traditional finance, and I was working in a bank like you, so we've got a somewhat similar background in that way. Um, and I remember first finding out about Bitcoin. I want to say it was in around December 2011, like my husband told me about it. And I just remember he was really excited about this new technology, this distributed ledger, it's so great, the tech. And I just like listened to him and I'm like, that sounds really boring. And even reading
Yes.
the white paper, like I read the white paper back then, and I just, my only memory of the white paper was just, God, this is like a really heavy read to get through. And it wasn't until 10 years later that I was looking to do a career change. And I had a bunch of colleagues that left to go to crypto companies. And so I was actually chatting to my mum, who is not a Bitcoiner. And I said to her, oh, I'm really interested in like finding out more about this crypto space. And she said, oh, Jordan Peterson, he's a Canadian psychologist. He has interviewed a bunch of Bitcoiners, which was weird because it's out of his wheelhouse. And so I said to my mum, I was like, why is he interviewing Bitcoiners? And she's like, oh, I don't know. I haven't watched the episode. I'll send it to you. Let me know what you think. And so I watched this episode. It's like hour and a half. It's called The Future of Money, question mark. And he's interviewing Robert Breedlove, the German guy, to Gigi, Richard James, the Australian filmmaker, and John Vallis, who's the kind of naturopath that I think lives out in Thailand now. Um, and this thing's like 90 minutes long. And at the end of it, I just had this moment of like, oh my God, I've spent 20 years in finance and I've understood nothing about money. And it was such a revelation to me. And it was like the penny just dropped. And I was suddenly like, wow, I get it now. And then I just became obsessed, like absolutely obsessed. But my experience has been in trying to impart that to other people. It's a real struggle because, especially with Western women, they're very comfortable in the fiat system for the most part. They're not particularly concerned about, their finances to the degree that, other parts of the world people might be. And so the sales pitch is much harder to explain to them why this is so important, even though many women care about human rights, they care about passing their wealth on to their children, all of those kinds of things. They're so indoctrinated to think of it as a boring technology that's incredibly risky, and it's just a bunch of boys playing with some tech that is probably going to go horribly wrong. That's kind of like the mindset that they have. So I'm really curious to know what your experiences were in starting to teach others about this, and when you asked women why they're not interested, what did they say?
Okay, so I would say this. So our experience might not be that different. Of course, when you approach a female about Bitcoin and any other type of technology, the first thing is like, that is boring, that's for men. And for us as African females, I would point out and say mostly it's because of how we are socialized to think by our own upbringing. In our households, the first thing, as in when you start going to school, and if you're in a setup where you have boys and girls, the boys will actually be encouraged to learn about sciences, maths, and all that stuff, right? But the females, you'd be like, oh, that is not for you. That is for men. That is for boys. Please focus on this. Maybe focus on household chores. Maybe focus on easier subjects like English or history, arts, and all that. So for us, mostly it's how we are brought up, societal norms that females are not able to do this, or females do not belong to certain spaces. So when you find such a lady who's actually been brought up in such a scenario, and when you approach them in with such matters, they're like, this is not for me, And one of the things that I've had constantly with females, even the young ones, even the Gen Zs, they're like, you're smart. I'm not like you, and you have to, like, for me, it has always been like our first lesson, introduction lesson, is always have to like try and help them unlearn this. So it's a matter of helping them unlearn that it's not about being male or female. It's about being a human being. You have the same brain capacity as the men. As long as you put your mind to something, if you want it bad enough, you can be able to understand it. And I get that different people are inclined differently. Some are inclined to the tech space, others are inclined, but it doesn't mean because you're a man, you're inclined to the tech space. It's just on an individual basis. So it has been challenging, yes, but with the cohorts, with the more people that we're training, we are seeing other females getting like it's sort of like creating role models for other females. They're like, okay, so if this particular cohort were able to do it, then I can also join the next cohort and I'll be able to do it because I'm seeing other females who are also doing it. And I would say this is something that we as females in the space already need to highlight more. Like whatever you're doing, I feel it's very important because some women are just waiting to see somebody who looks like them. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white. There's a female, someone who is somewhere who is just looking at, is there any female participating in this space? You understand?
Yeah.
I have females, I have students who come into my class, they are more technically inclined, and they're like, okay, I need to see another female who is in the tech space. So if we have females who are like highlighted in the tech space, which will help the younger generation be like, okay, so it's not really a matter of being female or male. It's a matter of whatever I can provide in this, whatever I can contribute in this space. And
Yeah.
one thing that I normally tell my students, it's not to like victimize themselves. Even with Bitcoin DADA being only a female-centric entity, I do not encourage females in my space to victimize themselves because one, they're Africans, or two, because they're females. Yes, we're females, but we have our own powers, we have our own strengths, we have our own skill set that can be able to actually make the space a better place.
Yeah, I mean, I think very sweeping generalization, but men tend to be more interested in things and women are more interested in people. And I think the trajectory that Bitcoin has taken at the beginning has been a very technical one because it's all been about the technology that you use in order to buy and store Bitcoin and, transact it and all the rest of it. So I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen more of that. And I also think I had a really interesting conversation with an investor who made a point that I hadn't really thought about, but the point she made was that a lot of the interfaces that we have in Bitcoin are terrible because they're designed So I'm going to say something very misandrist now, but they're designed by men. And so they're made to be kind of to do a function, but they're not made to be intuitive or easy to use or pleasant to use. And I was using this analogy to somebody the other day. I was sort of saying, you know, like when I think about my own household, it's like my husband does things like fixes things, builds things, and then I come in and I make it a home. I make it pretty. I put the nice fabrics in. I make a comfortable arrangement of the furniture. I figure it out, you know, and we haven't really like agreed this structure. I just don't like drills and I don't like hammers and I don't like bashing things around. And he loves it. But I really like creating a beautiful aesthetic space. And I think a lot of the technology that we have is like that. It's functional, it does what it's supposed to do. But my God, when you read some of the instruction guides or you use some of the wallets, it's like, really, did this have to be so unintuitive? Like it could have just been much simpler to
I
use
guess
and not so.
so.
Yeah, and I really think that we're starting to see that transition now because we see more women coming in, and it's like the structure has been built, and we're now coming in and making it actually useful and easy to use for other people, and you know to on ramp more people. And I think women are going to be that key that really on ramps the masses. And to your point as well, if you teach a woman about Bitcoin, she's going to share it with her kids. She's going to, you know, use it for the household budget. So all of this stuff just starts to become incorporated into the family unit. It's not just like a hobby that the guy's doing down in his basement, you know, after hours kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, like you said, the first people who actually came into this space, of course, were men, you know, so the first people we are seeing as role models are definitely men. So which might have contributed to even women's not wanting to participate in this space because the first people who they saw were men and they assumed this is like a man's play, you know, this is like a man's world, like, okay, so my contribution is not needed here. Why would I want to be in this space? You know, and you asked about some of the reasons that the females were giving, and it revolves around, you know, being a male-dominated space. I'm sure you know what happens in such spaces. I've had complaints from females who, you know, felt like they were sort of discriminated against, you know, others forms others were like sort of passive aggressive towards them. Others just felt like, you know, this wasn't like the space for me. You'd walk into a room and it's full of men and you're like, okay, maybe I'm in the wrong place. Whether this men did anything or not, you just feel like uncomfortable. um of course, the other issues were like you said, it being too technical and having somebody who was raised in a setup where that anything technical was meant for men. Of course, that was like a turn off, like for them. We have had issues like females being sort of really not risk takers as much as men are. So those are some of the reasons. And this is
I think
constantly,
that's actually a massive reason in the
yeah,
early
yeah.
adoption phase is that women see it, and particularly because the press around it has, I think, been intentionally so aggressively critical. I think that's a
Mhm.
massive reason. Women look at it and they think this is risky, and it's actually the opposite. You know, it's more risky to not understand Bitcoin, and I think the more women understand that, the better.
And even like recently when we were Uganda, we actually we definitely asked for some of the reasons that made them not jump into the space sooner, and being risk averse was one of the reasons that they gave. You know, they were scared that they would lose their money and all that kind of things, and also the misinformation that is actually around Bitcoin, especially in Africa, and the
Oh,
scams
really?
produced, yeah, the scams that have been introduced into Africa with the disguise of, you know, this is Bitcoin, you can be able to mine Bitcoin, so give us your money, you'll be receiving this amount. So a lot of people have fallen victim to such, so it makes them
Uh,
more afraid. So anytime you come up with the topic Bitcoin, they're like, okay, so you're a scammer, you want to scam us as well. And then they relate Bitcoin to any other cryptocurrency. So you talk about WorldCoin, they're like, oh, so well, you're one of those people. You introduce Bitcoin, you're like, oh, so Bitcoin is like WorldCoin. Are you also going to give us money? So you have
so
to
are
like
they shocked then when you're like, actually no?
Of course. And the thing about being a female in this space and actually understanding what you're doing, it helps the other females gain more confidence, right? And I feel, again, like I said, I feel we need to tell our own stories as females. You know, we need more females being highlighted. We also need females starting to build products that will solve our problems as well. You talked about having wallets that were too technical. I feel having females in this space who can even just give like back the feedback to the builders, whether it's men or female, is really an important factor, you know, because it doesn't make sense when you're building something and no one is using it.
Yeah.
Right? So I feel more books need to be written by females as well. We need to see females in high positions of power, not just as, you know, community builders or marketers. We need to see more, we need to see more females forming or founding their own companies or even holding positions of power in already existing companies. I feel that is very important.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think it's happening. I think it's happening. I mean, I think one of the biggest tragedies about the lack of female representation of Bitcoin for me has been that my sense coming into this community was that it wasn't the men keeping us out. We were actually just keeping ourselves out. Like we weren't
Yeah.
putting ourselves forward for things. We weren't, kind of taking leadership, in making things happen. And I think that that's a real shame. And it was interesting actually, because recently I put something out on my platform to all of the women. And I just said, look, I'm hoping that you guys are going to all of these upcoming events, but please, please, please don't just buy a ticket, put yourself forward as a speaker. If you feel that there's something that you'd like to share, like apply to be a speaker. And I thought actually I would love to see more women speaking. I mean, there's one girl who's on my platform, Alison Yancey. She has she's a yoga teacher and she has a wellness platform. So she literally has like an online platform that you can become a member of and you can participate in her yoga classes. But she's also a Bitcoiner. And she did
Mhm.
the session for us about yoga and Bitcoin and how the values, yogic values, tie very closely into Bitcoin's values. And then she wrote a guest post for my Substack about it. So she has applied to the Bitcoin Nashville conference to actually host a yoga class and teach people yoga in a Bitcoin context, which I would just love to be able to go and attend. And you just don't see things like that at
Yeah.
conferences. So I think definitely having that like female spin, it would be yeah, it would massively improve, I think, just the adoption, of the technology and the ecosystem. So what's next for you then? So I mean, you've got a big old mission, because if I don't know what the population is of the African continent, but if you're trying to orange pill half of them, that feels like a few decades worth of work.
Well, the good thing, it doesn't have to be done in a day. That's the beauty about it. It doesn't have to be done in a day. I feel the first thing, or what will actually really accelerate Bitcoin adoption, and especially across females, is setting leaders, you know, setting leaders in these countries, um, dealing or getting women to adopt something. For me, I feel it's very easy as long as you have a strategic plan and as long as you actually captured a few people, you know, a few influential females. So once you do that, you'll just see massive, massive interest flowing in. I'll give an example with the Ugandan team. So the last cohort, you only had 3, right? So you only had 3 females from Uganda. This time when we went to Uganda, we had like over 30 females attending the class.
Wow.
So imagine the next meetup that we'll be attending. I assure you it will be more than 100 females.
Yeah.
It will be more than 100 females because they have seen what Bitcoin is able to achieve, or they've seen the impact that Bitcoin has had on their fellow friends. Now they'll be like, okay, I want to be part of this community. I want more, right?
Yeah.
So if we have such across all African countries, of course, we cannot get everybody, we cannot definitely get everybody, but I feel that we can get the majority if we continue doing whatever we are doing. If, of course, there are certain challenges, and if we are able to navigate those challenges, then I'm sure 5, 10 years from now, the narrative would have changed. It will not just be males participating, it will be males and females participating in the space.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, definitely. Yeah, and I think also those women who are parenting their kids are going to pass that knowledge on to their children. So you're talking about a whole generation then that grows up Bitcoin native, for sure,
Exactly.
for sure.
Exactly.
Are you planning on coming to which conferences are you doing this year? Are you going to do Bitcoin Nashville, do you think? Will you be there?
I am not sure, but what I'm certain is I'm going to Cape Town. So for now, that's the only
Ah,
one that I'll be certain of. I don't want to speak
is
about.
that the adopting Bitcoin one?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So for other conferences which are outside Africa, might be tricky to say I'll be coming because of the visa issues, you know. So
Is
I
that
might not be able
challenging really to come into the US if you're Kenyan?
it. Oh my God, it is. It is. It is. I remember the last time that I applied, my visa was denied because the reason that I was given might have not been the reason, but the reason that I was given is because I am single. So
What?
yeah.
Are
Yeah,
you
it could have
serious?
been any other reason, but she just didn't know what to tell me. So she just said that it could have been any other reason, but
Are they worried you're going to like come over and marry an American man?
I never come back.
That's hilarious. Oh my God, that's so
Yeah,
archaic. I mean, the fact that they would even say that, even if that's not the reason, make up something else.
that's the thing. I was like, really, of all the things.
God, that's so medieval. Sorry, you're not married. Oh my God. Well, so I guess that brings me to another question because in talking to you, I'm thinking to myself, it would be really nice to have a predominantly female event that we could all convene at. Um,
Mm.
So I know, for example, my friend Rachel is organising one in Madeira. So a lot of people are going over to Madeira for the conference there, and she's organising a specific women's event. But you're an event organizer and you obviously know the African continent really well. Have you considered putting on a conference that would be predominantly for women? And can we make that a thing and get everybody to come? I've never been to I think the closest I think I've technically been on the African continent. I've been to Taba, which is that UN controlled piece of land across the water from Jordan between Israel and Egypt. Um, so I guess it's technically on the continent, but I've never actually been to what I would consider Africa proper. So I'm well overdue a visit. And a women's conference could be a really fun way of doing that. I don't know. Do you have
I
any
know.
plans?
I actually had that thought last year, but then I looked at how many females are in the space and I was like, would it really work? I wasn't really sure about the numbers, but I am happy that Charlene Fadirepo, as well as Farida, got to do something with an African Bitcoin conference. There was like a small sort of event for the women who actually attended the African Bitcoin conference. But definitely that has been on my mind for some time. I wasn't just sure if we can get the right numbers because it wouldn't make sense like bring only 2 to 3 people in Kenya, and consider it as a conference. But it's
Where is the best hub for Africa that people would most likely convene at? Like where's the easiest place to fly into and logistically, what would be the easiest spot? Is Kenya a good place?
I think Kenya is one of the best places because one, it's considered as the tech hub of Africa. I would not say Ghana is hard. I think also South Africa is a good place as well. So if I was asked, I would pick Kenya, South Africa, and Ghana.
Okay, that's interesting. And what's the best
Yeah.
time of year to come? Like when are the monsoons and are the monsoons everywhere or like what's your climate?
Oh, Um, so I'd say either August or December would be a great time. Either August or
August,
yeah.
really? It's not too
Hmm.
hot.
No, it's not too hot. Kenya has
Ah,
never been too hot, extremely hot.
oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Talk about so ignorant I am.
I would say January is one of our hottest months, but with the climate change, like right now it's even raining, so I'm not even sure what's happening with our climate. But January is considered one of the hottest months in Kenya. August sort of like rainy and hot as well, so it's not really too hot. It's also not too wet, same as December.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking like we're in January now, so realistically, I mean, August or December could be doable. It could
Mm.
be doable. Uh, I mean, look, I will have some conversations on my side and see what the appetite and schedules are for people and things like that and what might be feasible. Um, I would be really up for doing it, actually. I would love to do that because I've never been to Africa proper, as I said. So for me, it's just a great travel opportunity. And I just feel like it's so nice for us to convene with women on another continent as well, because a lot of the stuff is like European, North American that we do. I think that'd be a real hoot.
Exactly, exactly. To be so exciting. Proper signal.
Yeah, right. That could be really fun. Oh my God. All right. Well, I think we need to take that offline and have a chat about it and see if it can
Yeah.
happen. But yeah, I'm just conscious of your time. So I just wanted to say thank you. This has been really interesting for me to learn about what you're doing. And I've been excited to talk to you for a couple of weeks. So could you just share where everybody can find you? I mean, I'll put them in the show notes, but obviously like your social media handles, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay, so across our social media handles, it's at BTC underscore DADA. That's at BTC underscore DADA. So you'll find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, of course, for the Gen Zs. We also on Nosta, of course, I might share that later on. What else do we have? We also have our website, which is btcdada.com.
Okay, perfect. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Lorraine or Marcel. I never know what to call you. I'm like, I think I
Either.
emailed you. Do you know, I woke up this morning and the first thing I thought was, oh my God, I sent her an email last night and I called her Marcel. And then I was listening to the podcast and you said, oh, everyone calls me Marcel. And I'm like,
Yeah, everyone calls me Marcel.
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.